Right. Hello and welcome back, everyone. So, in the first video, this little collection, I went over some modifications and house rules in an attempt to fix and improve the game of Malifaux. Most of those little rules changes mainly affect the gameplay. However, a couple of them affect the actual models. And that's what these videos are for. Going over some of the models and seeing how my suggested changes will affect them. So mainly, I'll be looking at peons and totems, looking to either remove them entirely, convert them into markers, or, for the most part, turn them back into proper models. For that, I will mostly be looking at the 3rd edition versions of them, and kind of rewinding them back to that state. For the most part, it is just adding a cost and maybe adjusting some health. Kind of it. The bigger change, however, is going to be the removal of summoning. That is actions that summon models themselves, as well as things that affect summoning. So, for more information about that, for more kind of in-depth look as to why I'm doing these changes, please check out that first video. For this video, however, I'll be looking at some of the keywords from the Resurrectionist faction. Although the removal of factions is one of the things that I suggested would improve Malifaux greatly. So each of these keywords will be functioning independently from each other. The keywords in question are McMourning and his experimentals, Molly and the Forgotten, Seamus and Redchapel, and finally Jackdaw and his Tormented. Now, as I did mention in the first video, I'm not going to be looking at the entire line of miniatures. I am just sticking to the keywords and models that I am most familiar with, and ones that I would like to continue using if I decide to continue playing Malifaux. Also, as mentioned in the first video, none of this has been playtested. This is all stuff that I'm just coming up with. Most of it is quite simple modifications, so it shouldn't require a lot of playtesting. But yeah, just keep in mind that none of this has actually been properly balanced or tested. I'm just eyeballing everything. So we will start with Dr. McMourning and his experimentals. So this is one of the keywords that actually lost the most models in the transition to 4th edition. A lot of them have either been removed for various reasons, or they have been moved to other keywords. Unfortunately, this has been greatly stripped down. But there is still a lot of good stuff here. Stuff that does require some thing to look at. So, there are 2 different versions of Mourning, Male Practitioner, and Insanitary. Unfortunately, in this mod, their names on the little pop-up thing have been reversed. Even though it does say Insanitary, this is Male Practitioner version, and this one says Male Practitioner, even though it is Insanitary. So, oops, oh well. So the Insanitary version is the one that mainly focuses on poison stuff. And this graph token. Now this one is, for the most part, pretty fine. The crew card as well. Not really much that needs to be touched here. As again, most of it just relates to poison tokens. There's one thing, however, that you need to take a look at, and that is Found the Tumor. So this is what summons the little gasser models, which in 4th edition have become summon fodder peons. So I will be taking a look at them later, but for now, a few models have this found tumor, actually. Sebastian and Rafkin also have this as a trigger on a couple of their things. A couple of their actions. Now, the quickest and easiest solution is to simply just remove it. It is just a trigger. It doesn't really affect much else. Just say goodbye. However, there is an alternative. In any place where it says found tumor, replace it with a new trigger that still uses crows. That is infect. Target gains a poison token. Quick and simple, fits with the theme of the crew, works with their abilities. It's a decent enough replacement. It does give the models more opportunities to put poison on opponents, which in 4th edition, poison is a bit worse, kind of. It does less damage. Since tokens don't stack, poison only ever does 1 point of damage, but it doesn't go away on its own. The model has to be able to remove it to get rid of it. So, in a way, putting poison onto enemies is at the same time both worse and somewhat better. If you can get it on early, then the damage can kind of tick up, and it is pretty okay. But putting it onto a model at later turns is kind of a waste. Unless you need something to finish off an enemy that only has like 1 or 1 health left. So it's a nice little finisher thing. But anyway, so yes, they can either be just removed entirely or have this poison thing put on. The only thing that I would recommend not doing that with is Laughing Gas on Rafkin. Because Laughing Gas is an ally only, and unfortunately, in 4th edition, there is no reason to put poison tokens on friendly models. I would just say get rid of this. And just replace the one on medical procedure with infect. In previous versions of the game, or I guess in 3rd edition, the experimental keyword was able to heal off of poison tokens. That's not the case anymore, not even on the crew cards. So, as I said, there is no reason to put poison onto friendly models. Which is why it's a bit of a problem here. But otherwise, these models are all fine. That is the only summon thing on them. It's an easy fix. The Malpractitioner version of McMourning, however, is a bit more complicated. So this guy has been turned into a primary summoner with not 1, not 2, but 3 abilities that summon. One of which is a core ability or core action. Whereas the others are just triggers off the scalpel. So the modifications for this one is a little bit more complex. The triggers on scalpel are easy enough. Again, they can just be both removed. Found the tumor can always be replaced with the poison thing, with infect. The summon for the zombie chihuahua, I just say just get rid of it. I couldn't think of a decent enough thing to put in here that is worth a soul stone. So, yeah, whatever. It can just be gotten rid of. Coupled together, however, is a bit more of a complex problem because all masters have at least 3 abilities. Some of them have a 4th one. One of which is usually a signature ability. Now, that's not a problem here, but you can't just get rid of this. Not only because it gets rid of one of McMourning's 3 abilities, but it also gets rid of his only way, or one of the only ways, of adding interesting parts onto a model. I think the other way is his crew card. Yeah. So unfortunately, simply deleting this is not really a good solution. That means that a replacement ability needs to be found. Now, there were a couple of different options that I considered. The first being a heal, because again, back in 2nd edition in particular, the experimental keyword was able to heal from poison tokens. So removing poison tokens off of, I guess, enemy models in order to heal allies is a thing that can be added back in. And then you can have the trigger or Creative Genius add interesting parts to the model that gets healed. That does mean that the leftover parts, McMourning's only other Soulstone ability, needs to be removed, because all it does is heal, which you're doing off of the main ability. The alternative, if you don't want to do the healing route, is just to take this Creative Genius and turn it into the main ability. So on the keyword, or sorry, on the crew card, adding interesting parts does require you to deal 2 irreducible damage to the target and spend 2 soulstones, so it's a pretty expensive and big thing. The interesting parts token is actually quite powerful in certain circumstances, because it allows your models to be affected by the enemy's crew card. You can steal their abilities, which can be quite useful. Oh, and it considers enemy non-scheme, non-strategy markers to be friendly. So, I mean, this is pretty good. And it's kind of reflected in the cost in putting it on. Now, for McMourning, I'm kind of tempted to have it cost a soulstone, but then I don't know. So I did limit it to once per turn, but the main limitation for it is they need to be able to remove 3 friendly poison tokens from enemy models within range. You do that, and then you can put an interesting parts token onto an ally. Maybe it's worth increasing the target number just to make it more difficult. Maybe it's worth adding a soulstone cost to it. Whatever, but yeah, so that's the thing. That's the other way of doing the replacement. And that way leftover parts to heal for a soulstone can be left as the trigger. So kind of 2 ways to do it, depending on how you want to. I kind of prefer this method, which is why I've got it written down. But yeah, alternatively, you can have it so that the main ability heals, and then Creative Genius is the trigger for the interesting parts. Which is kind of interesting that the Creative Genius is not the one that has a soulstone cost. It's just a mask. So, anyway. That's my idea on how to redo McMourning. It's quite a big change. It's one of the models that's received most modifications in this whole project. There are a couple of others that have had to be modified like this, but McMourning, this one, Practitioner, is definitely one of the more complicated ones. The other option, of course, is to just not use this version of McMourning. The other one is fine. It just needed that Found the Tumor replaced, but otherwise everything else is good. So maybe just ignore that this one even exists. But it's kind of a shame to lose an entire master because everything else on this is fine as is. Except for the other triggers that need to be removed or replaced. As far as the crew card goes, the only problem is this thing. It's alive. Which allows you to remove a summon token from the target, which, as I mentioned in the first video, is not actually... You can't actually do this. Based on the rules, summon tokens just flat out cannot be removed. And it doesn't say that there are exceptions for abilities. So this is actually... might as well not even be there anyway. I don't know if it's necessarily worth finding a replacement for it. I think everything else on the card is fine. And like I said, it's not like this really worked anyway. So just get rid of this. The It's Alive trigger, just pretend it's not even there. So again, a lot of changes need to be made, but in the end, I think it is possible to turn him into an actual working master that doesn't rely on summoning bullshit, so... yeah. Moving on to the totems. So, Corpse Curator, I thought about turning into a proper model. I think it was in the previous version. But I think it was Transmortis. Or it might have been a dual Transmortis experimental, I can't remember. Unfortunately, in 4th edition, all it really is just a way of being able to recycle your models. It dies, and it becomes an allied minion, and whatever. So... and it's just another way of being able to... but graph tokens? No, it affects models with graph tokens. So anyway, it's not great. I think there might be a way of being able to turn into a full model, but honestly, I'm not a fan of it anyway, so just bleh, it's gone. And as far as the zombie chihuahua goes, as an individual model, it's kind of underwhelming. But the stats, I mean, even the stats and stuff are not the greatest. Um, the best part about it is just giving the Aura Fumes tokens to models. The rest of it's kind of shit. However, in previous versions of Malifaux, there was a model called the Canine Remains. That model has been removed. As you may notice, there's no Canine Remains card here. I kind of preferred them over the zombie chihuahua, to be perfectly fair. Plus, I think it's kind of funny to have a small group of zombie dogs, like big Rottweilers and Golden Retrievers and such, and then a little zombie chihuahua with them. So I'm thinking that the better idea is to turn the zombie chihuahua into Canine Remains and bring them back. Now, unfortunately, since they don't exist at all in this version, I had to basically recreate them from the 3rd edition rules. So this is what I've come up with for the Canine Remains. Which is somewhat but not really based on the Zombie Chihuahua. So they are Minion 4, which is in keeping with the other Hound type models. Cost of 3, again, cost of 3 and health of 4, which, again, actually all of this. So cost of 3, health of 4, and the stat line are all in line with the other Hound type models. There's the Cursed Hounds from Neverborn and the Guild Hounds from, well, the Guild. I decided it was worth keeping the Nose for Decay, but I wanted to get rid of the Horrific Odor because that was something that was going to be the little Gasser's wheelhouse. So the Canine Remains have this Nose for Decay, which allows them to move towards remains markers as they're made. They have the Gnashing Bite for their main attack, but it has been modified somewhat. The Combs trigger, I did remove it. I don't know if it needs to be. I think it was put it down for the cost of 3, but I guess it can be kept on if you really want to. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's mainly the same. Skill of 6 versus defense, damage of 2, target gains a poison token in addition to the damage. It has the Tomes trigger for grab on, but it loses rigor mortis. Because it kills the Chihuahua, and I think it only does that because of the thing where it's meant to be summoned back in. So again, you just do the big damage, you kill the Chihuahua, you summon it back in, you do it again. Not the biggest fan of that, so blah. Everything else it loses as well, because again, Rancid Smell, that's kind of Little Gaster's thing, and Spare Parts is just the card draw ability, which again kills the Chihuahua. You're supposed to resummon it and draw more cards, and resummon it, draw more cards, and blah blah blah. So yeah, that all is gone and is replaced by the Annoying ability, which is another very common Hound ability. But it's a low skill, 4 versus willpower. Target gains an entrance token with the same grab on Tomes trigger. So that's basically my recreation of the canine remains and replacement for the zombie Chihuahua. So in fact, neither of the totems really make it into this modified version of Malifaux. Zombie Chihuahua, it's sort of in the version of Canine Remains. But otherwise, yeah, that is what I would suggest for that. For the rest of these, the Sebastian Rafkin, again, just the found the tumor triggers can be removed or replaced with the infect. Otherwise, Rogue, Necromancy, Flesh Construct, and Kentoroi are all fine as is, I believe. There's no summoning, no real modifications that need to be made there. That just leaves the little gasser. So this guy is a peon. You can tell by the fact that he only has 1 health. However, these used to be a thing, like a proper model, in 3rd edition. So there was plenty of information to refer back to in order to turn this back into a proper minion. And get rid of all of the garbage that was only been added on, like all the kill this model stuff, because it's summon. So my suggestions for this would be oops. Increase the cost to 4 and the health to 5. Make it a proper health line where you get the soulstone when it dies. Remove the demise ability, where when it dies it deals a damage and inflicts poison, and replace it with a horrific odor from the little Chihuahua. Now, instead of exploding to inflict poison, it just ends its activation. And it's basically just like it's constantly surrounded by a cloud of poison gas. Otherwise, the drag behind and the flight are totally fine. It's a great little model to be able to move markers around. For the back, corpse float is fine as is. The pull my finger, however, is a bit modified. So that rather than doing damage, which, I don't know, you could keep it this way if you really wanted to. I, again, rewound it back to the 3rd edition version, which gives poison tokens. But, I don't know, because of the way the poison tokens work, if you're doing them with these attacks, it means that the horrific odor probably not as useful. I don't know, maybe keep it like this, just have it inflict damage. And then keep the reposition and get rid of stopped up. So, I don't know, it might, maybe Pull My Finger is better just kept as is and get rid of Kill This Model. Or get rid of Soft Up. I don't know. I think, yeah, maybe it should be one or the other, but not both. So maybe for this one, just remove Stopped Up. Yeah, maybe just like that. And that turns it into its own model that still keeps it different from everything else that's in the crew, including the addition of the canine remains. The canine remains are just an annoying model that jumps around from remains markers and attacks enemies with this grab-on trigger to really kind of annoy them. Whereas the little gasser is just a floating gas cloud that moves around, poisons enemies, and occasionally blows up corpses. But otherwise, yeah, those are the suggestions for the experimental keyword. It's quite hefty. This is definitely one of the keywords that required the most modifications. So, yeah, that is how I would say experimental should be changed. Now, moving on to Molly and the Forgotten. This is where we start getting into the keywords that are a lot easier and simpler and don't require a whole heck of a lot in the way of modifications. For example, both of the masters are totally fine. They don't really require any changes. They're good to go as is. Now, as far as the totems go, the Noxious Nephilim I didn't really mess with. I think this is new for 4th edition. I might take a look at it at some point to see if it's worth including, but honestly, I wasn't too fond of it anyway. And I think it's meant to be more, well, again, it's one of those ones that I think was for the Returned, for Neverborn, and was dual keyworded into Forgotten, maybe? I don't remember. But yeah, I think it's definitely more Neverborn than it is for Molly, but I don't know. If it was to be kept, I don't think there would need to be that much in the way of modifications to it. Just get rid of Tap the Ley Line and give it a cost of like maybe 8. Yeah, I would say 8 because this guy has a couple of pretty decent and strong abilities. So yeah, get rid of Tap the Ley Line, give it a cost of 8, and it should be used good for use. Necrotic Machine, kind of similar. In fact, yeah, both of them. Well, no, the Necrotic Machine is a little bit different. Okay, so Necrotic Machine, again, kind of basing cost and health and such on the 3rd edition version, would have the health reduced to 6, cost to become 5, and remove Tap the Ley Line. Oh, so yes, again, this was mentioned in the first video, so if you're wanting more information, please go back to it. But yes, so for every totem has one of these abilities that allow you to draw cards. I'm getting rid of them to replace them with a general rule, so that's why I'm removing them off of every single totem. But yeah, with the reduced cost and with the necrotic machine not really doing as much, it should have a lower cost. And the Nephilim. Again, simple enough. Give it a cost of 8. And remove tap the ley line. It's fine as is. As far as everything else goes, everything else in the keyword is pretty much fine as is. The only one that's worth taking a look at is Forgotten Marshal. So he has an ability on his Peacebringer called Release the Dead, which allows him to just instantly kill a model if it has a summon token. Now, since summon tokens are no longer a thing, it is possible just to remove it and be done with it. It's fine as is. It does mean that he's losing Soulstone trigger. That's one less thing to be able to spend Soulstones on, but Molly's not really a Soulstone heavy keyword anyway, so eh. I did, however, look into finding a replacement. I just wanted to see if there was something that could easily be slotted in here, and it turns out that there is one. So the Forgotten Marshal is a Death Marshal that kind of turned traitor and ended up looking a bit too deeply into Resurrectionist magic. But he is pretty much entirely based on Death Marshal. He has the Pine Box and the Priestbringer, which are very Death Marshally weapons. So I had to look through the Marshal keyword to see if there was something that I could use instead of Release the Dead, and there is one thing that popped out. So rather than Release the Dead, you replace it with same Soulstone cost, Rest in Peace. Target must have a Craven or Abandoned token. When resolving, this action deals +3 damage. This is directly based off of a martial ability that does a very similar thing, but with different tokens. I think it's Craven and something else, I can't remember. But yeah, if you're looking for something to put in here and another Soulstone trigger with a keyword, I would just say use this. Critical Strike already does the +1 damage, but it is a RAM trigger, and it's like the basic default one that you go to, whereas the Rest in Peace does more damage, but it does require the target to have a specific token on it, which you might not have, in which case you can just default to Critical Strike. And it requires a Soulstone to use rather than just a regular card. So yeah, that's kind of it as far as the Forgotten keyword goes. That's the only things that need to be modified. Just turn the totems into regular models, and either remove or swap out the trigger for the Forgotten Marshal. And that's kind of that. So next up is Seamus and the Redchapel crew. So this one required a little bit more modifications being done. So both versions of Seamus have a thing that they can summon. Sebastian Baker summons Dead Dandies, and Last Breath summons the Doxies, which are the new Rotten Bells. I tried figuring out something that would work as a replacement. a heal, a movement, or something like that, but Seamus already kind of does those things. So, as of right now, my only suggestion is to just remove those 2 triggers. So, Murdered Suitor off of Sebastian Baker, and Lovely Surprise off of Last Breath, just delete. It does get rid of his Soulstone abilities, or Soulstone triggers, but whatever. Seamus is another one that doesn't really use Soulstones all that much, so just spend them on an extra model or something. But otherwise, they're fine, and so are the crew cards that go with them. There's no real any summoning stuff on these, so those are fine. As far as the totems go, the Copycat Killer I wanted to keep. It's another quick and easy modification to bring it into being a normal model. Based on its 3rd edition stats, reduce the health to 6, give it a cost of 5, and, as usual, remove the resupply ability. But otherwise, it's fine. Cost of 5 might be a little bit high for this, since... Although, with a high damage ranged attack, even though it is only once per activation, and some pretty decent other tricks, I think it... and terrifying, yeah, actually, it is worth 5. I was thinking maybe since it doesn't do a whole heck of a lot, you can reduce it down to 4, but no, I think actually it is worth a 5. For White Rabbit Co., I was actually thinking of not including this because it seems more like a Bayou card or Bayou model. And I guess it kind of works for Seamus since he is meant to be Mad Hatter / Jack the Ripper. But I don't know. It kind of felt weird including it in this keyword. If you do want to include it, then the only thing that really needs to be removed is the resupply. Everything else is fine. The health can even be kept at 9. I would probably only make the cost like 7. Because it only has the 2 abilities, the damage is not that great, it means it would have no tactical actions. It's kind of more simplistic and straightforward. It has a couple of decent things on the front, but otherwise, yeah, it's... I would definitely say... Cost of 7. And then remove resupply. Oops. How? Yeah. You keep jumping to the front. That's annoying. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, just very quick changes. Change cost. Remove resupply. It's good to go. As far as everything else goes, not really much needs to be modified except for the dead doxies. They have their tactical actions, which allows them to remove an entrance token to summon a dead doxy. I tried thinking of a replacement, some other way of being able to remove an entrance token to do a thing, and honestly, I think it's just best to get rid of it. They don't really need the tactical action. I don't know, there might be something that can be added to this. Like, remove an entrance token to have another dead doxy move close to the target or something. I don't know. Honestly, I think the best option is just to get rid of it. Otherwise, everything else is fine as is. Which brings us to Jack Daw. And the Tormented. So this is another one where both the Masters and the Crew cards are totally fine as they are. Not really anything needs to be changed. They're good to go. Okay. Oh, yeah, I actually got these right around. Okay. But those are fine. For the totems, Lady Legia is one that is actually worth having as its own model, and Jacuna is one that was its own model. It kind of sucks that it was downgraded to being a totem, because it was actually a pretty good model back in 3rd edition. Fortunately, they're both fairly simple modifications. So Lady Legia has her health reduced to 6, and given a cost of 4. And of course, remove tap the leyline. 4 might be a little cheap, especially with a decent ranged attack. That's a magic versus willpower rather than a regular like physical. And wasting away can be pretty decent as well. Although again, the negative to duels is not that big of a deal anymore. But yeah, the problem is that costs are so chunky in this game that because of the very narrow band of costs, each cost has a lot of wiggle room in it. So this could be considered a high-end cost 4 or a low-end cost 5. So again, kind of basing it off of the 3rd edition and just the idea of keeping the cost within a point or 2 of the health, just go with that. Might see, after doing some testing, if you ever get around to doing it, might bump the cost up to 5, but whatever. For Jacuna, keep the health at 9. Set the cost at 7, but that again might be a little too cheap. Even if tap the leyline is removed. The main reason that I would suggest bumping it up to an 8, especially, is if you decide to do what I am choosing to do and adding incorporeal to the model. Main reason for doing that is because I think it's something that should have been on Jacuna anyway. If you notice, most of the other models have either living, undead, or construct on them. And anything that doesn't have one of those tends to be incorporeal. Now, there aren't many other incorporeal models that I've got out here. But for Tormented in particular, there are several incorporeal models. And every single one of them doesn't have the keywords. Jacuna doesn't have the keywords, but for some reason does not have incorporeal. I think she should. So in particular, with adding that back on, that might actually be a cost 8 model. As far as everything else goes, the only other thing needing to take a look at is Carrie. Who again is incorporeal and doesn't have things. But she has a Screams of the Lost, which is a once per turn summon a drowned. Again, just get rid of it. I don't think there is a particularly decent replacement for it. And so just delete off the card. It's gone. She still has another way of being able to spend soul stones, so it's not like totally lacking. And I think there are plenty of other things to be able to spend soulstones on. Although, again, I think Tormented is not a soulstone heavy brew. I think most of the Resurrectionist stuff is not particularly soulstone heavy, but anyway. So yeah, just get rid of Scream of the Lost, otherwise it's fine. Nothing else really needed to be looked at. So for a couple of special mentions, we've got Strange Lady and the Keepside Strangers, which are dual keyword models for both Forgotten and Redchapel. Now, in previous versions of the game, these dual keyword or multi-keyword models were fairly common. There was quite a lot of them. 4th edition got rid of pretty much all of them. There's only a couple left, which I think if you're using my suggestions for the rules modifications and you are getting rid of factions, these kind of become more useful. Because it means that these models can be included in either the Forgotten or Redchapel. Which I don't mind. I kind of like the idea that certain models can be fielded in multiple keywords. These guys do fit in either Forgotten or Redchapel. However, usually what happens is that even though they slap a second keyword onto the models, they're typically designed for one. I think when I was looking at these, they seem to work more for Forgotten than for Redchapel, I think, was my decision, or my findings. Oh, I don't know. They seem to go off of entrance tokens, but anyway. But otherwise they're fine as is, no summoning or anything like that, nothing that needs to be modified or worried about. You can even keep them as the dual keyword, and totally fine. Now the other is the fungal keyword. So each faction has gained a little micro keyword. I think they come from the starter sets. They're meant to be simple, out of the box, playable, little things that you can put down to learn the game, to show it off to other people. They're basically like demo keywords. But they're fairly small. They're about half the size of a regular crew. Oh, well, I think they're like 20 or 21 points. And they're led by a henchman rather than a master. So you can use them just as the starters, or you can use them if you're wanting a smaller, quicker game. But I think for pretty much all of them, or for all the ones that I remember, they don't require any modifications. Because again, they're meant to be self-contained little things, so no summoning. They're meant to be very simplistic, so no complex stuff. No special things like totems or peons or anything like that. They are just fine as is. So yeah, that is everything, I believe. Those are my suggestions for how to modify these keywords to remove summoning, to change totems into regular models, and to upgrade peons back into a regular model. A couple of the keywords required a bit more effort than others, but otherwise not much in the way of complex changes. In fact, I think this is pretty much the same for all of them. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot that required a really heavy reworking of the model. But once again, none of this play tested. I have a feeling that once I actually start trying these out, I think some of the costs in particular of the totems might need to be modified. But otherwise, yeah, that should be that for the Resurrectionists. So, thank you so very much for watching. If you are interested in seeing what I did with some of the other keywords from other factions, then please check out the other videos in this collection. If you want to see the list of house rules and all the stuff that I suggested for changes, then that is all in the first video, which hopefully everyone has watched before they start watching these faction videos. But if you haven't, please go and check that out. All of this will probably make a lot more sense. And you'll see some of the other stuff that I suggested as changes. But anyway, I think that does it for this video. I hope to see you in some of the other videos. Again, thank you very much for watching. See you again later.